Every Christmas, it was the same excuse. "There just isn't enough room for you and the kids," my mother would say, her tone polite but firm, as if gentleness could mask the cruelty. And every year, I'd find myself standing outside the house I grew up in, clutching gift bags in one hand and my children's tiny hands in the other, listening through frosted glass as my nieces and nephews tore into wrapping paper. I used to tell myself it would change, that maybe the next year would be different. I baked cookies, wrapped presents, even called ahead just to be sure. But when Christmas Eve arrived, the pattern repeated. "Maybe next year," my mother said again, smiling tightly as she blocked the doorway, the table behind her already full. My daughter looked up at me wide-eyed and asked, "Mommy, why aren't we going inside?" I didn't answer. I just led them back to the car. That night, I tucked Leia and Ben into their small beds in our 2-bedroom apartment, kissed their foreheads, and stared at the empty corner where a Christmas tree should have stood. On the kitchen table lay a text from my sister, Melissa Hope. "You're not too upset." Mom was overwhelmed. "Maybe stop by tomorrow." Tomorrow for leftovers. After years of exclusion, missed birthdays, overlooked parties, family photos where I was absent, it finally became clear. They would never make space for me. So that night, I made a promise I would stop waiting for permission to belong. If they couldn't make room at their table, I would build my own. The months leading up to that cold Christmas had been difficult. My marriage had ended quietly, without slammed doors or shouting, just two people sitting at opposite ends of a wooden table, signing the end of a life they had outgrown. Jacob kept the house in Charlotte. I packed the car, buckled in my children, and returned to Charleston, hoping that being near family would mean stability. But instead of support, I was greeted with tight smiles and unspoken judgment. My parents treated me like a disappointment. Melissa carried her superiority like perfume, and I quickly realized I had walked back into the same dynamic I had once fled. The apartment I found was modest, peeling tile, 2 cramped bedrooms, and a leaky faucet, but it was ours. I started work as a junior marketing assistant at a small firm downtown, the pay just enough to cover rent and groceries. At night, after the kids were asleep, I worked on freelance projects, logos, websites, copywriting, sometimes until 2 a.m. My eyes burned with exhaustion, but my heart raced with possibility. Every project, every dollar saved, felt like one step closer to the life I wanted. Some nights, I sat on the living room floor sketching blueprints of my dreams, a house with a red door, a kitchen full of laughter, a Christmas that didn't depend on anyone's permission. Leia taped one of my sketches to the fridge. She had drawn 3 stick figures outside a house with snow on the roof and written in her uneven handwriting, "Home just us." Momentum came slowly at first, then all at once. By spring, my freelance calendar filled. Cafes needed websites. A yoga studio wanted a rebrand. A small law firm hired me for monthly social media strategy. The exhaustion of balancing work-school drop-offs and deadlines was real, but so was the pride. My boss noticed too. After one client presentation earned applause, he pulled me aside. "You've got real instincts," he said. Within weeks, I was promoted and then promoted again. For the first time in years, I felt like I was moving forward. Then, one crisp October morning, I drove past a house that seemed to call out to me. Its paint was chipped, the porch light hung crooked, and ivy crept across the yard, but it had something else, a wide porch bay windows and a bold red door. I scheduled a tour. When we stepped inside, Leia whispered, "Mom, it smells like Christmas," while Ben twirled in a sunlit dining room. I closed my eyes and saw it, garlands on the mantel, laughter spilling from the kitchen, a table big enough for 12. 3 weeks later, I signed the papers. When I told my family, their responses were as cutting as ever. "Isn't that a bit much, Natalie, for someone in your situation?" my mother asked. Melissa texted, 4 bedrooms ambitious. "Sure, you can keep up with that." I didn't reply. I was too busy ripping up old carpet painting lavender walls for Laya and dinosaurs for Ben, and setting up my first home office. The house wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and every corner felt like a declaration that we belonged. By November, the house was alive with stories. Sunflowers painted by Laya were taped to the fridge. Ben's toy trains lined the hallway radiator. Stacks of client folders grew on my desk. For the first time, I felt steady, grounded, even proud. Then one night, as I brushed Laya's hair, she asked softly, "Mommy, who's coming to Christmas this year?" The question caught me off guard. For so long, I had only focused on surviving, not celebrating. But in that moment, a vision snapped into place. I didn't just want to host Christmas. I wanted to redefine it. The next morning, instead of making a shopping list, I wrote down names people who had been there when my family hadn't. Maya, my college roommate who called me her daughter's Aunt Tally. Mrs. Ellis, the elderly neighbor who baked banana bread after every storm. Jonah and Eric, the couple across the street who had helped me move a couch late at night. Claire, the art teacher who stayed after class so Laya could paint dragons. 10 names, 10 hearts, 10 chairs. And then a wild idea took hold. Melissa had once dragged us to an upscale restaurant called Magnolia House, where she endlessly fawned over the chef Adrien Moss. On a whim, I called his office. His assistant answered briskly, "The chef is fully booked through December." My heart sank. Then I said carefully, "I'll triple his standard rate." There was silence. "Then I'll check with the chef and call you back." An hour later, she returned the call. "Miss Warren Chef Moss would be honored to prepare Christmas dinner in your home." I hung up the phone and stared at the calendar. It was mid-November. I had 1 month. When Christmas morning arrived, the air outside was crisp and golden, but inside my home, it felt like magic had been bottled and released. Chef Moss and his 2 assistants moved gracefully through my modest kitchen, transforming it into something out of a magazine. The aroma of rosemary garlic and warm bread drifted through the rooms like a hymn. I tied Laya's ribbon into a bow, while Ben carefully placed napkins at each setting, counting under his breath. 1, 2, 3, 10. Every detail felt deliberate, every moment soaked in significance. At 2 p.m., the first knock at the red door echoed through the house. Maya arrived with her daughter in tow, carrying wine and laughter in equal measure. Mrs. Ellis followed, presenting Laya with a tin of cookies wrapped neatly in ribbon. Jonah and Eric came with a wreath they had made themselves, and Claire, ever thoughtful, brought watercolor cards painted by her students, one of them a delicate portrait of my house, complete with its bright red door. Soon, my dining table, once a bare second-hand find, gleamed with crystal glasses, polished silverware, and candlelight. We toasted with sparkling cider and champagne. We shared plates of herb-crusted lamb, smoked mushroom ravioli, and chocolate soufflé drizzled with spiced cream. Chef Moss, to my surprise, was warm and kind, explaining each dish with pride as my children stared at him as if he were Santa in chef's whites. At one point, I stepped back, watching the flicker of candles against smiling faces, and for the first time in years, my chest loosened. There were no tight smiles, no sharp edges, no measuring of worth. Only joy. After dinner, the party moved to the living room. Laya challenged Eric to Candyland, while Ben fell asleep on Mrs. Ellis's lap, his reindeer plush tucked under his chin. Jonah played quiet jazz on the piano, and Maya's little girl twirled in her sparkly socks. The room glowed with warmth, both literal and unseen. For once, I felt not like an outsider begging for a seat, but like the host of something whole, something real. Impulsively, I pulled out my phone. I hadn't posted much that year, perhaps a few snapshots of the kids or vague quotes, but this moment, it felt earned. I took 3 photos, the candlelit table before anyone touched a plate, the kids laughing in the kitchen with Chef Moss behind them, and a group shot where every single face was alive with laughter. My caption was simple. Grateful for friends who feel like family. When Christmas feels like coming home. The likes rolled in quickly, along with comments. This looks beautiful, Natalie. You deserve this. Wait, is that Chef Moss? I smiled, my heart swelling until the calls started. First Melissa, then Mom, then Dad. I ignored them, but when I checked my texts, Melissa's message was waiting. Was that really Chef Moss? How did you even book him? Why didn't you invite us? I stared at the screen for a long time, the weight of years pressing down. Why didn't I? Because every Christmas I had been left standing on a porch told there wasn't room. Because for years I had been made invisible. Now I had made my own space, and there truly wasn't room for people who only showed up when it suited them. I didn't reply. Not yet. 3 days later, just as the quiet was beginning to feel comfortable, the crunch of tires in the driveway startled me. A sharp knock rattled the door. When I opened it, Melissa stood there in her tan wool coat and designer boots, a gift bag dangling from her hand, her eyes sharp and restless. Without waiting, she stepped inside. The warmth of the house seemed to press against her, and her gaze swept the garland on the banisters, the drying glasses by the sink, the framed photo from Christmas Day. Her lips tightened. Nice house, she said, her smile thin. Didn't realize you were doing this well. Thanks, I replied, closing the door. The kids were upstairs playing, and I wanted them far from this conversation. So she began, voice too sweet, you really hired Chef Moss. The Chef Moss. I did. Funny thing, he doesn't work with rude clients. Her smile faltered. You've always been dramatic. Posting those photos, it was petty. You made us look bad. I laughed softly. You didn't need my help for that. Her voice sharpened. You're mad about one Christmas, Natalie. One? And suddenly you're staging this extravagant dinner, parading it online like you've been abandoned. One, I repeated. Melissa, when was the last time I was invited to anything without being treated like a pity guest or excluded entirely? She opened her mouth, then closed it. After a silence, she tried again. I just think it's sad. This chosen family thing, it's revenge, not real. It's not revenge, I said, steady and quiet. It's healing. For years you made me feel like I didn't belong. Like my kids were too much. Like I had to earn a seat at a table I grew up at. And when I brought it up, no one apologized. No one ever said, we see you. We love you. We're sorry. You just smiled and changed the subject. Melissa shifted, her confidence thinning. After a long pause, she whispered, Mom's been crying. She feels humiliated. People at church saw your photos. They're asking why you weren't at Christmas. She can tell them the truth, I replied simply. That there wasn't room. She regrets that, Melissa murmured. Does she, or is she just upset? People noticed. Her breath shook. I know we haven't been fair, but this, it felt like a slap. Good, I said, my voice unwavering. Maybe now you understand how it feels. Her expression cracked. I don't want to lose you. You already did, I said. The day you left me and my children standing outside with gift bags. The day you told me to come by for leftovers. The day you decided your comfort mattered more than our presence. Melissa sank onto the couch, deflated. What do you want? Respect, I said. Not pity, not guilt invitations, just respect. She swallowed. And if we change, could we still be family? I turned, staring at the red door Claire had painted on one of her cards. If you want to be part of my life, you'll have to earn it with actions, with honesty, with something real. Her voice was small. Then I'll try. Good, I said, firm but calm. Because I'm not making space for anyone who doesn't show up with their whole heart. That night, after Melissa left, I didn't cry. I thought I might, but instead, I sat on the couch watching the fire crackle low while the house hummed with the faint scent of cinnamon and pine. The kids padded downstairs one by one. Laya, wrapped in her blanket, curled beside me. Why did Aunt Melissa come? She asked, her voice small. I hesitated, then said gently, "She wanted to talk." "Is she mad?" "No, baby," I whispered. "She's just learning." "Learning what?" I looked at her face open and full of questions the world hadn't touched yet. "Learning how to love better." She blinked, then smiled softly. "I like our kind of love better." With that, she rested her head on my arm, and all the years of exclusion seemed to loosen their grip. In that moment, I understood that what I was building wasn't just for me. It was for my children, who deserved to know what it felt like to belong. The days that followed were quieter but richer. I started to notice things I hadn't before. Laya set the dinner table without me asking, lining up the silverware neatly. Ben drew pictures of our house, always with 3 smiling stick figures, sometimes even adding Chef Moss with a cape like a superhero who had saved Christmas. Mrs. Ellis came by for tea every Thursday, bringing stories from her youth. Jonah and Eric helped me install new light fixtures, filling the house with both light and laughter. Claire began mentoring Laya in watercolor painting, patient and kind, encouraging her to chase every dragon she dreamed up. It wasn't official. It wasn't blood, but it was real. My children were growing up in a house where they weren't treated as too much or not enough. They were learning the difference between obligation and genuine care, between tolerance and true love. One night, while tucking Laya into bed, she asked me something that froze me. "Is it okay to say no to people if they make you feel small?" I felt my throat tighten, but I nodded. "It's more than okay," I whispered. "It's necessary." "Good," she said with a grin. "Then I don't want to invite the cousins to my birthday. They're always mean." I blinked. "That's your choice," I said. "It's your party. You get to decide who comes." She pulled her blanket to her chin and smiled like she had just passed a secret test. As I turned out the light, it struck me I wasn't just healing from my family's rejection. I was teaching my children something I had never been taught, that love does not require shrinking yourself to fit, that real love expands to make room for all of you. 2 weeks later, a message came from my mother. "Your father and I would like to see the children. Perhaps we can do something for your birthday." I read it twice, then set the phone down. They hadn't mentioned Christmas, hadn't mentioned the photos, or the conversation with Melissa. Just the children. Not me. The omission told me everything I needed to know. That weekend, as we decorated for Laya's birthday, she carefully taped her invitations with glitter stickers and hand-drawn hearts. She turned to me and asked, "Do I have to invite people I don't feel safe with?" "No, baby," I said, smiling softly. "You never do, and neither do I." That night, I finally replied to my mom. "The kids are doing well. Their schedule is full, and so is our life. If you'd like to reconnect, it has to begin with honesty and respect. I'm no longer entertaining anything less." Days passed with no response, but instead of the silence feeling heavy, it felt lighter than it ever had before. Lighter than all the years I had spent begging for scraps of belonging. Because here's what I had finally learned. Love that has to be earned through silence isn't love at all. Weeks turned into months, and the rhythm of our chosen family deepened. Jonah dropped by with tools when the sink leaked again. Maya called just to check in after long days. Claire helped Laya paint a mural of sunflowers on her bedroom wall, while Mrs. Ellis taught Ben how to bake biscuits on Sunday mornings. My children were learning firsthand that real family wasn't about bloodlines or last names. It was about the people who showed up time and time again without being asked. Then one morning in November, as I was clearing breakfast dishes, my phone rang. It was Chef Moss's assistant calling to confirm. "Same menu for this Christmas?" she asked briskly. "Yes," I replied, smiling. "But add maple-glazed carrots for Laya and s'mores for Ben. Consider it done." As I hung up, I realized how much had changed in a single year. What had once been a night of humiliation had transformed into a season of abundance, laughter, and truth. The guest list for this Christmas was even longer, with new names joining old ones, each seat filled with someone who belonged. December came quickly, carrying with it the kind of crisp air that smelled like pine needles and possibility. Our house buzzed with preparation. Laya helped me hang garlands along the banisters, while Ben stuck paper snowflakes on every available window. Mrs. Ellis dropped by with tins of spiced cookies, while Jonah and Eric spent an afternoon wrestling with the Christmas lights in the yard, until our red door glowed like a beacon at the end of the street. Inside the dining table, once just a refinished second-hand piece was polished to a shine, waiting for 12 chairs to be filled. On Christmas morning, I woke before dawn, slipping downstairs to the kitchen, where the hum of anticipation pulsed through me. When Chef Moss arrived with his team at 9 a.m., the house transformed once again into a haven of delicious aromas: maple-glazed carrots roasting for Laya, chocolate soufflés cooling on the counter, lamb seasoned to perfection. He winked at Ben, who was already wearing his chef's hat from last year, and let him sprinkle parsley on a platter as if it were the most important job of the day. By 2 p.m., the doorbell rang and the celebration began. Maya came first, her daughter running straight to Laya with arms wide. Mrs. Ellis followed with a carefully wrapped tin, insisting she had outdone herself with a new recipe. Jonah and Eric carried in a basket of homemade bread, still warm from the oven, their laughter spilling in before them. Claire arrived last, presenting Laya with a watercolor painting of our home beneath a soft snowfall. Each arrival felt like a thread weaving into the fabric of something whole. Dinner was a symphony of flavors and joy. Glasses clinked, stories flowed, and laughter carried into every corner. When Chef Moss introduced the maple carrots, Leia sat up straighter, her eyes wide with delight. "You remembered!" she exclaimed. Ben devoured his s'mores with sticky hands and a grin that stretched across his face. I watched as my children leaned into the embrace of this family we had built. No tension, no shame, just the easy comfort of being wanted. As plates emptied and candles flickered low, I found myself glancing at the red door. It wasn't just wood and paint anymore. It had become a boundary and a promise. This home would never again be a place where love came with conditions. It would be open only to those who showed up fully with honesty and warmth. Later that evening, after guests drifted into the living room, Ben curled on the rug with his trains, while Jonah played piano. Laya nestled against Mrs. Ellis, humming softly. I slipped into the kitchen for a quiet moment, scrolling through my phone. Notifications pinged from photos I had posted earlier, the glowing table, the children laughing, the group raising glasses together. Comments flooded in again. "This looks magical. You've created something beautiful." Then almost predictably, I saw it: a missed call from Melissa. A message from my mother. "We'd like to see the children soon." No mention of me. No acknowledgement of the boundaries I had set. Just the same quiet pattern dressed in politeness. I set the phone down and rejoined my guests, the sound of their laughter spilling through the house. The difference between those messages and the joy around me was sharp, undeniable. That night, when the last dish was washed and the kids were tucked in, I lingered by the fireplace. The flames had burned low, but the warmth lingered. I thought of all the years spent knocking on doors that never opened, of the quiet humiliation of being left out, of the ache that once felt permanent. And then I thought of this house, this table, this chosen family. I realized I no longer needed apologies that might never come. I had built something greater. Over the following days, life returned to its gentle rhythm. The kids played with their gifts, neighbors stopped by to exchange leftovers, and our living room remained full of watercolor cards and stray crumbs from too many desserts. Melissa didn't show up again, and my parents never replied to my message. Strangely, it no longer hurt in the way it once had. Silence, once heavy, had become a kind of peace. Weeks later, as I walked Laya home from school, she skipped beside me holding my hand. "Mommy," She asked, "Do you think we'll have Christmas here forever?" I smiled at her, squeezing her hand. "Yes, baby, as long as we want to." Because I knew now that Christmas like family wasn't about obligation or appearances. It was about choice. It was about making space for the people who loved without conditions, who laughed without judgment, who showed up without excuses. It was about teaching my children that they never had to beg for belonging. They already had it right here behind the red door. So this is what I want to leave with you, love. Doesn't shrink to fit the convenience of others. Real love expands, making room for every part of who you are. And if the people you thought would love you can't, then you have every right to build a new table. Fill it with laughter, with kindness, with those who choose you. Because family isn't just blood. Family is who shows up and stays. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below about what family means to you.